Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Conversations with Taz. Tonight, we are going to be talking MMIW, the difference between appropriation and appreciation, and tons of other things that have to do with the Native community. Not often is the Native community given a proper spotlight to just tell us what they need from us. And I have a wonderful, wonderful guest tonight, and I will let her introduce herself.
Danjo, she eat Laura, she eat Shle, she eat Lapayende. Hello, my name's Laura, and I'm Lapana Apache, and most people probably know me better as Diamond Dog.
Yes. And let's start with this. What is the biggest misconception you feel people have regarding your community?
That we don't exist anymore.
I did not realize people actually thought that.
Yeah, I've met people walking around on this earth that believe that there are either no Native American people that exist, or that Native people, like that everybody is a descendant of some distant Native ancestor. That like there's so many misconceptions, but I've actually met people who believe that Native American people don't exist anymore.
Now, I have heard a lot of people, I've heard that, and I tried to correct someone that claimed that, their great grandfather, and even tried to claim that their father was Native. And their father clearly was not Native and happened to live in one of those regions that I knew that there was a such thing as the $5 Indian. And I was like, that may have been what he is, but he's not Native. They're like, no. My grandma used to tell me stories of this. And it sounds very much like a certain Disney movie that we know. So how do you combat that ignorance in people?
So I live east of the Mississippi River, and the Indian Removal Act moved tribes from the east of the Mississippi River to the west of the Mississippi River, but there are still Native people here. And then in the instance of my family moved here when my dad was a kid. So I was born and raised in Indiana. And I live in an area with a much lower Native population. And, there were Native people that did not end up removed with the Indian Removal Act of the, 1830s. And then there are other people like myself from other tribes and communities that ended up back east of the Mississippi. And so people a lot of times in the area where I live, because they don't see a lot of Native people, or they may not realize when they're seeing people that they're Native. Like, I've walked into restaurants and had the person behind the counter greet me in Spanish before, assuming that I don't speak English. And so a lot of people, when they see Native people, they don't assume that we're Native. They assume that we're another race. And so I get the "what are you" question from people a lot. And I'll be like, "Oh, I'm Apache." And they'll be like, "Oh, I'm an Indian too. My great grandma was Native." I'm like, okay, well, I'm culturally connected to a community. My parents are Native. My grandmothers are Native. Like, a lot of people don't understand what it means to be a Native person and a part of a Native community. And that's no shade to people who, were not culturally connected because of adoption or forced assimilation. That's a different thing entirely. But, if you're talking about family stories of a great grandmother that may or may not have existed, it's entirely different than being a Native person who's a part of a community and a part of a culture and connected to that culture. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, that difference.
I know that right now there are a lot of people within your community and outside of your community talking a lot about MMIW, but I don't think a lot of people truly understand. So would you like to explain to them?
Yeah, so the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis it's something that's been happening since 1492. But in the United States, in Canada, in Mexico, Native American women, we are, and non-binary people, assigned female at birth people are 2.5 times more likely to be the victims of sexual assault. And in some places, we are 10 times more likely to go missing or be murdered. And 86% of the people who are committing these crimes are not Native. And right now, this crisis that's affecting our communities, the extraction industry plays a big role in this problem. So pipelines and oil and gas companies are one of the major reasons for the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis. And so when we're talking about we don't want this pipeline on our land, one of the reasons is we don't want the destruction of our land and water. The other reason is because when these pipelines are being built on our land, it is literally killing our women. And tribal governments do not have the ability to prosecute non-tribal citizens. A Supreme Court case ruled that tribal governments do not have the ability to prosecute non-tribal citizens. So when 86% of the people who are killing and raping our women are not Native people, the tribal government can't prosecute these people. It's supposed to go into the hands of the federal government. The federal government hasn't done anything about it. So Deb Haaland just started the task force that's supposed to be addressing this issue in 2021. But we've been speaking out about this issue for years because it's been affecting us for years.
And for those of us that are not Native, how can we help you all in this cause?
One of the big things is helping us raise awareness, helping share our voices about this issue. I've had so many people who have said to me that they did not know about the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis until they joined TikTok. I can't tell you how many people have said that to me. And, I've been on TikTok for quite a while, and I made a video it was like 2019 talking about MMIW, and it was me really quickly dropping some statistics because I hadn't seen anybody on TikTok talking about it. And the first time that my own audio came back around on my For You page, I literally broke down into tears because I realized people were sharing this information. And then this was before Native TikTok was really a thing. And then we started getting more and more Natives who started joining TikTok, and we started this Native TikTok community, and more people started sharing this message and making their own videos and sharing more information, and more people started to learn about this crisis that's been impacting our communities for so many years. And so just helping share our voices, helping put pressure on the federal governments, both in the United States and in Canada, as well as if you're, in Mexico. It's also an issue that impacts Mexico. And that's one thing I also want to remind people is because my tribe, our homelands are on the United States and Mexico border. The Gadsden Purchase and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo split my tribe in half. And we don't have a treaty like the Jay Treaty. The Jay Treaty allows citizens of tribes along the U.S.-Canada border to be able to have dual citizenship between the United States and Canada. We don't have a treaty like that. Our tribe is literally split in half. And the MMIW tribe or crisis affects indigenous nations in Mexico too. And so that's another thing that I always try to remind people is that the MMIW crisis doesn't stop at the Mexico border. And so putting pressure on governments, putting pressure on elected officials, and just helping share our voices and, you know, raise awareness and donate to organizations that are helping victims and families, and like MMIW USA and those kind of things are all ways that non-Native people can help us with this crisis. Because I mean, I know somebody who is an MMIW, and I don't know, like, I think almost every Native person I know knows somebody who's been affected, knows families who have been affected. You know, I know somebody who has lost 2 nieces.
We have, excuse me, a second guest that has popped in. Would you like to introduce yourself, dear?
Hey, I'm Vicky, Victoria C859 on TikTok. I just got off work, so like I have to stop and get gas. So I'm probably going to be popping in and out. But you know, just to kind of piggyback off of what Diamond Dog said, you know, there are tribes that do have the J Treaty, and for example, like I'm a member of the Micmac tribe, but I'm a Rustic band, which is in Maine. You know, most people know Micmac as First Nations in Canada, right? So we do have the J Treaty, but the major thing that happened with the J Treaty is, of course, everything that happened in this country post 9/11. So even though that we do have a treaty where, you know, I remember growing up as a kid, we would just get on the boat in Portland, Maine, jump on a ferry and cross, and we never had to have birth certificates or anything like that. You just say, I'm using the J Treaty and I'm going to the Yarmouth Reserve or wherever. And we can't do that anymore because of 9/11. So, and you know, now with the COVID and the pandemic and everything, we are literally a split tribe with completely different resources. My sister, she's no longer with us, but you know, she grew up in Canada. She grew up on the reserve along with, you know, 90% of my cousins and relatives. And the only way we saw each other was if we crossed over back and forth. You can't do that now. You know, and it doesn't matter. You know, when my sister passed away in 2015, I thought that I was just going to be able to use the J Treaty, fly to Maine or Bar Harbor, jump on the ferry, and boom, I'm there in 8 hours so I could attend her funeral and do the ceremonies that I needed to do for my family, me being the oldest sibling. And I couldn't do it because I didn't have a passport at the time. And, you know, I absolutely hate passports. It's part of the thing. And if you ask a lot of natives, we hate passports, but it's a requirement. And I missed out on what I needed to do for my family because I couldn't use the J Treaty to go back and forth. It's a really hard thing. So, I mean, based on what Diamond Dog says, it's a real problem. And, you know, because I'm American, I cannot, and I had dual citizenship right up until that, you know, but as an American citizen, you don't get the resources that you would in Canada. Not that there's a lot of them. I mean, you know, let's be honest. But, you know, you don't get those resources. But at the same time, they don't get ours either. So, I mean, that's just kind of where, you know, a lot of that lies. And the whole thing about the MMIW is what, and I don't know if she's already said this or not, but I'm just going to kind of jump in, is the fact that MMIW and what she said as far as Native TikTok and people not really learning or knowing about it. And the reason why is because awareness is not brought to the platforms that people are used to seeing missing people. So a lot of times what happens is it's not quote a federal thing. It only goes through that particular state's clearinghouse. And depending on if it was on tribal land, you might not even see if someone went missing on Pine Ridge, you might not ever see it because it really depends on whether or not tribal police, or if they allow police that's in that area to come and file a missing persons report to even be allowed to be put onto or into the state's clearinghouse. With that said, I do know that there are some states that are now, with the attention and stuff that's being drawn to it, are paying more attention to it. But it's still not a cross-wide federal thing. And people don't realize that MMIW, missing and murdered Indigenous women, boys, two-spirits, and all things, it's sex trafficking, but there's not a national or a federal interstate communication. So someone can go missing in South Dakota and they get trafficked, or they end up getting murdered and their body is found in Arizona. Nobody can put the two together. Nobody can put the two together. So I couldn't tell you, because I'm really not a statistics person. I couldn't tell you how many cases, but I'm going to guess that there's a lot where there was a body found on the Navajo res, or there was a body found in Nevada, and it took them a long time to figure out that she was the 19-year-old missing from South Dakota, because there's no communication between the states. There's no federal anything. And I don't know why that is. I really don't know why. We have it for NEMAC, the National Missing and Exploited Children's website. But if it's for an adult that is of sound mind, that I'm walking to the store because I don't have a car and the store is 2 miles away and I have to go get some groceries, and no one ever hears from me. A lot of these reservations don't have cell service. Hell, the Navajo reservation doesn't even have running water, much less cell towers. So how do you make sure that your family is safe? How do we ensure safety for for these people? And it's hard. You can't. I mean, there's ways. You travel in groups, you travel in pairs, and I have my own thing, and that's why a lot of natives you will really find it's not just about stopping the pipeline. Yes, we're all water protectors and we're all, protectors of the land because that's what's been passed down to us from generation to generation. But the part of the major problem with pipelines is the man camps. And that's where people go missing and nobody is really putting it together. Then on top of that, the man camps are people that are coming in from everywhere, south, north, east, south, because they're coming for the job. They're there for 6 months, 12 months, 9 months, whatever their contract is, and then they're gone. Poof. There's no way to track these people. And then within that time period, you have 15 missing people. And nobody knows, excuse my French, where the fuck they went and who they went with and what happened to them. And then all of a sudden you'll find them months later. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. And another issue too is when you've got a lot of the big cities that have a lot of like a high native population, like Seattle, Minneapolis, and those cities with high native populations, in Canada, like Winnipeg, when you've got people that report their missing people to the police say, oh, well, they're just out partying. They'll be back in a couple of days. And there's a TikTok creator who her sister has been missing for 17 years. And when she went to report, when her family went to report her sister missing, That's what the cops told them. Oh, your sister's just out partying. She'll be back in a couple days. It's been 17 years and she doesn't know where her sister is still.
Right.
So they're not looking, the cops aren't looking for our people. And so
No.
it's up to us oftentimes to be the ones out there walking out in the street looking for our people. It's usually up to us sharing the posters on social media, sharing, you know, as far and wide as we can. I can't tell you how many times it's happened where somebody I know has not been heard from for a couple of days, and you know, the whole community is out looking for them, calling them, showing up at their door, trying to find them and make sure they're safe.
With no help from law
With no help.
enforcement. There's self-organized community searches for these people. And it's really sad. My daughter is 26. She's Afro-Indigenous. And there was a video on TikTok that went viral. And I swear to God, as soon as I found it, I bought it. And as you know, when I can, I try to gift one to someone, the Invisaware product line. I really try to make people aware of it because it's not a product
Can't hear you.
whether you have cell phone service
Okay.
or not. Hold on. I know I'm at a gas station. It's really loud. Invisaware. So Invisaware is a product that stays on the person that is GPS, that has a GPS tracker in it. So it's just like GPS on your phone, GPS in your car. And if someone is in danger, they can press that button twice. If no one responds, it'll send a text message to 5 people. And the hopes is that if you don't have your phone on you, you know, that's how people are tracked, right? They're tracked through your last location on your phone. The whole thing is if you don't have your phone, or if they throw your phone and somebody, you know, naps you, hopefully they're not going to grab jewelry, or they're not going to go for anything like that. There's all different types of products, bracelets, you know, scrunchies, headbands, all that kind of stuff that you can press that button twice and alert police and alert those 5 people. So immediately it goes to ADT. If they don't hear from you, or those 5 people start looking, it's like an immediate response. And it's a crying shame that more natives don't have it, because it's not cheap. You know, it's not a cheap product, but I'm going to tell you what, it's so worth it. And it's the small stuff like that we have to worry about. You know, like I shouldn't have to be worried about whether or not my daughter runs up to Kroger, and I live in a metropolitan area, that someone's not going to pull.
True, because we're not far from each other, so I know exactly what you mean, Victoria. I know exactly.
It really sucks. Hold on, I have to take a call, so I'm going to jump off here, but I'll be right back.
Okay. I do have, hold on. Looks like everybody's getting calls. I do have one question. It might be a completely ignorant question. My apologies. But in my little lifetime, I have noticed my community as well as yours, the women are extremely sexualized. Do you think that also plays a part into this, and how so? Absolutely.
It is actually the topic of my master's thesis.
Oh, okay.
So my master's thesis is on Spanish contact in the Southwest and Northern Mexico, and how they over-sexualized Native women, and how that has been upheld in North American culture over the last 500 years, and how that has led into the current crisis of Native women being more likely to be sexually assaulted and more likely to be missing and murdered. And there's a lot of intersection with the Black community as well. You know, Native bodies and Black bodies, particularly of women, are over-sexualized and hyper-sexualized. If you look at particular, you know, people in history, like if you look at, for example, the Hottentot or Venus, she was a Black woman who had a particularly large backside, and she was hypersexualized for it. If you look at particular Native women throughout history, if you look at advertising in the 19th century in particular uses Native women in advertising, because you look at advertising now, okay, and you know sex sells, right? Well, you couldn't advertise with a nude white woman in your advertising in the 19th century, but you put a Native woman scantily dressed or nude on that advertising, and that was acceptable. So it has been upheld over the last 500 years in North American culture to hypersexualize Native women. And that's how it, like I said, it intersects with how they hypersexualize Black women. And a lot of the issues you see with that are completely overlapping, you know, in the way that that not only do they hypersexualize Native women and Black women, but they also try to emasculate the men in our societies as well. And it in this attempt to like I said, like to uphold this narrative that they're trying to put on our communities. There's a really good book called Bodies in Contact that has different articles about contact and colonization from around the world. And it doesn't just talk about Africa and the Americas, but it also talks about colonization in Asia and how they do this in Asia as well. And it's incredibly interesting to look at the same themes and different colonial powers, but the same way that they hypersexualize the women and attempt to emasculate the men when they encounter different cultures around the world. Oh, we lost Taz.
Oh, that's interesting. I think it's part of the reason why most natives, you know, most native tribes are so matriarchal, you know, because we're so
Sorry
protected.
about that. I got kicked out for a second, lady.
Oh, you're fine.
You know, I think that's part. I really honestly do. I mean, I know it goes back so many years, but I mean, there's so many. Most native tribes are going to be matriarchal, you know, and that might be part of the reason why. I don't know, because you know, women are so used to carrying everything on our backs anyway. I mean, I don't know.
So,
but I mean but the cultural appropriation intertwines with MMIW, because I mean, she's right. Everything goes back to that. You know, everybody wants that little, you know, they want to play cowboys and Indians. You know, they want to play, the dress up as the sexy Pocahontas, and, you know, they want their little Indian princess to play with. And when it's all said and done, they throw, you know, they're done with them. They throw them away like they're trash. And that's how, you know, it's perceived. And then when you see all of that going on that's why Native TikTok just goes so hard against cultural appropriation, because it's just everywhere, and it's just so dangerous. It's so dangerous for all of our people. Yeah. I read a story about a young lady. She had an accident at work, and I think she worked in fast food or housekeeping or something like that. And she was Navajo, I believe. And she got taken to the emergency room by a friend, a coworker. She got taken to the emergency room. She was treated at the emergency room, and no one has ever seen her since, because she didn't have a ride back to where she was supposed to be going. So she started walking. Like, how messed up is that?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that the over sexualization of Native women is not only that we're portrayed as being hypersexual, but it's also that we're available to white men. And you look at these different stories throughout history, and you can even see this in, like, so one of the things I looked at in my research for my master's thesis was a lot of art and depictions, like early European depictions during colonization. And you often, the way that women are depicted is in sexually inviting positions. They'll be, facing the conquistadors with and they'll be nude and their legs will be open. And they're depicted in this way, and then these drawings and woodcuts are sent back to Europe. And only 30% of Europe was literate in the 16th century. So all of the information they're getting about this, quote, new world is, look at all these naked, sexually available women. And so this has been perpetuated and upheld for the last 500 years in North American culture, and it keeps getting perpetuated in every century through different forms of media. So when we're telling people don't wear that sexy Indian princess costume, it's not just about the costume, it's about the continued hypersexualization of Native women that leads into this current crisis that we're facing, where our women are 10 times more likely to be killed.
Yep.
There's one other thing that I've noticed that overlaps between our communities. We know that the history within the United States has been completely whitewashed, but they always like to portray us as older, and they like to portray pedophilic molestation as a consensual relationship, as if we're the over-sexualized predators of grown cis white men. And I see it perpetuated a lot. Victoria, I don't know if you've been to the Richmond flea market.
Yeah.
I don't know how long this booth was there, but there was one booth. I promise y'all, I wanted to flip everything over in this booth. There were sexualized figurines of Native women next to plastic dream catchers.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, I'm like, I know I'm not Native, but I don't think anybody would be mad if I flip this over.
It's just everywhere. Everywhere you look, it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. You cannot walk into a Home Goods, Amazon, Walmart, Hobby Lobby. I mean, it's literally everywhere. And yes, there's dismantling going on by making mascots change their name. And, we've got our hardcore activists going against that. We've got people going against cultural appropriation. She is like a hardcore cultural appropriation. I am too, we call it out. There's so many other Native creators on TikTok, but it's just beyond all. Everywhere you look, there's something being appropriated. It's something, it's not just in, it's mainly it's in Native culture, because there's not anyone other than the Native and Black community that will sit there and say, oh, it's okay because I'm part Native, or, oh, you know what, that's okay because I have a Black boyfriend. Oh, that's okay because I have mixed kids. Oh no, that's okay if I do it because the justification of the bullshit that's in their head. And it doesn't happen in any other community. Like it's not, you don't hear people saying, oh, it's okay if I eat curry because I'm part Indian, or it's okay, if I wear, Victorian dress and dress up at it. You don't see that. Like it only happens in the Native and Black communities.
Yeah, just like the gentleman who we probably gave him nightmares, Victoria, over the weekend.
Yeah.
And chose stupid. He decided he was going to combat the Black community and the Native community all at the same damn time.
Yeah, I'm having that. I'm not having it. And my page,
we saw you at the same time, right? We saw you at the same time. And he said, like, well, I'm okay with this and I'm okay with that. Well, shut up and be quiet just because you are okay with it. I understand that every individual person, no community, no person within a community is no community is a monolith. I understand that each individual person can feel a certain way. My thing is, please feel that way in private. Don't endanger other people and put other people in a position to be disrespected, to be talked down to. It's I can't speak for you all, but I know for myself, it's not pleasant to sit back and see your culture be appropriated. It's not pleasant to see your culture and your skin and your life be put on as a costume.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And we have a lot of people, with the increase of ancestry, DNA, and all of that. And I'm 100% all for reconnecting. I will always forever be a reconnecting Native my entire life, because, I was raised in it, but not really. And, you have all of that, and it's fine for people.
I can't hear you. Your volume's gone.
As long as they're doing it respectfully, as long as they're trying to reconnect respectfully, I don't have a problem with reconnecting Natives. And a lot of people think that we do, when it's really not the case. Am I right?
Yeah.
I mean, people think that it's okay to just jump around and dance around in, regalia that they haven't earned, and, beat on a drum, when in fact, that's not the way we do it. That's not the way it's handled. That's not, because people don't, there's steps. A jingle dress dancer has to earn every single jingle on their dress. They have had to have done something in that community to earn a jingle. And, a lot of people don't know that stuff. So when people wear these stupid fake Novum Crafts headdresses, that's where the disrespect comes in, and that's why people just get so mad.
Well, and it's like, one of the arguments that makes me crazy is when we're like, don't appropriate our culture and don't use us as mascots and take the butter lady off the box. People are like, you just want to remove Native American culture from American life. I'm like, no, you don't know clearly what Native American culture is, because the lady on the butter package is not Native American culture, and that's not our culture, like the fucking dipshit Rick Santorum saying we birthed a nation from nothing, Native Americans didn't contribute to our culture. Like, what about 4/5 of the food that you eat, and the cotton in your clothing, and the, this and all the Constitution of the fucking United States came from us? Like, our culture is a part of the very fiber of this country. New York City was built by Mohawk iron workers on Lenape land. Like, we are American culture, but most people don't know what Native American culture is. They think Native American culture is the butter lady and the dollar store headdress. That's not my culture, and that's not what I want to see represented. What I want to see is people learning actual decolonized history. What I want to see is people respecting my culture, not disrespecting it. And so, and then that dipshit, he lost his job on CNN. Good for him. And he made some comment about how he got savaged. He literally made a comment that he got savaged off TV. Well, you know what, motherfucker? I'll savage you off TV again because you are a racist. Like, I just, and he literally said again, well, it's not racist to say that Native Americans don't contribute to our culture. Yes, it is, because you clearly don't know what our culture is, and that our culture has contributed to every single bit of this nation, including the Constitution you swore to upheld when you were a fucking senator.
But isn't it so amazing that the savages of the world are always calling everyone else a savage?
Okay.
Because I don't recall any of us going to a country, trying to kill them all off, or importing them to another country because we couldn't do anything.
Right. And that's the other thing. Okay. That's another thing that makes me crazy. Like, as a historian, okay, like professionally a historian, one of the big things that you always see racists who don't know anything about history trying to justify colonization is they will say, well, Native Americans were constantly slaughtering each other before Europeans got here. And I'm like, well,
how would you know, first of all?
Yes, there was warfare between, Native American nations, just like any other country, but no more or less, like no more so than Europe. And if you look at European history is way more brutal. Like, so most people don't know this, but the other era of history that I have expertise in is the War of the Roses. Like, if you know anything about the War of the Roses, that was a brutal time period. And Tudor history is my other, that's my other area of expertise. That was a brutal time period in English history. The reason why I started reading about it and studying about it was because it was contemporary to the period I was studying in the Americas. And so I was like, I wonder what was happening over here at the same time. And so I got really interested in it. That was far more brutal than anything that was happening at the same time in the Americas. And then you get people who so they have all these justifications for what Europeans did in the Americas by saying, well, Native Americans, they were just, doing this, and they were without really any actual understanding of any Native history or any Native culture. Just like the myth that Native Americans didn't have a concept of land ownership. We had concepts of land ownerships. They just didn't look like what Europeans considered land ownership.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't
no division. There was no states. There were no borders. There were no, you had tribes migrating according to weather, temperature, culture, seasons, what was grown, where the buffalo herd was. My tribe, we were fishermen. So, we followed the lobster. And you go all the way from the tip of, Greenland, all the way down, Cape Breton, all the way down to Boston. But all of that, nobody knows about, nobody knows about that. Nobody knows, okay, these tribes followed, the buffalo herd, or these tribes followed, the deer and, everything else that was available, or they moved south into, the Seminoles moved south because of the availability of fruit, and the Aztec tribes, they moved northward. And it's astounding to me that nobody knows this history. And more importantly, what's even more mind-blowing is now that there's more information out there that people don't want to learn.
Yeah. Well,
that's what's more astonishing to me. I have a lot of times in my comments, I want to learn. But then when it comes time, nobody wants to do the work.
Yeah, that's why I started doing the whole series on historic Native American cities, is because people aren't taught that we had cities here before Europeans got here. And Tenochtitlan was one of the largest cities in the world in 1500. It had a population of 400,000 people. Okay, it was one of the largest cities in the entire world. But when you see, like, there was a video that was shared a couple months ago by InfoSoup, and it was a list, it was like a chart of the largest cities in the world, and they, like, you know, raised and lowered with time and all of that. They completely left off the Western Hemisphere until New York shows up. And I'm like, you're leaving off Tenochtitlan, Cusco, Cahokia. You're leaving off all these humongous cities that existed in the Western Hemisphere. But people aren't taught that we were building cities here. And people are also, you know, that's where that whole ancient aliens conspiracies come in. Well, if we can't figure out how they built it, it must have been aliens, just like they do with Egypt and other cities in Africa. Well, these brown people obviously aren't smart enough to figure out how to build this. It must have been aliens, even though people have no problems believing Europeans were building castles at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Building castles, not bathing, walking around, and here's a little nugget for you all watching. There is a company. All they do is make things for the bathroom. They're called Saturday Night. I bet you all don't know why they're called Saturday Night. Because for the longest, that was the only night that a lot of people took a bath.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the rich people that were looking down at other people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I do want to ask you ladies this. What is the proper way for someone to appreciate your culture?
Buy from native artists. If you're going to look on Etsy, look under their bio. It's going to tell you where that's going to come from. Natives are very proud. We are very, very proud of where we come from. If you look on Etsy, you're gonna the first thing you're gonna say under about me is gonna say, I'm from the Navajo tribe. I'm from, you know, I'm a Seminole. I'm a this, I'm a that. And there's so many different native artists, and it's not just about beaded earrings. You know, there's so much other stuff out there, but look carefully if you buy anything off of Etsy, because it's almost happened to me, where you end up looking at it and there's someone over in Switzerland or Russia that's selling their stuff, pandering their bullshit, and they're pushing it off that it's, you know, Native American, and it's not. There's so many creators on TikTok that have so many small businesses, you know, from makeup to woodworking to baskets to, you know, all kinds of stuff, blankets, wool, I mean, clothes, everything. You know, there's all kinds of hashtags. Instagram, I know that, you know, beaters are getting booted off Instagram left and right, and I think that's an atrocity too, but, you know, it is what it is kind of thing. But when you buy something off a native artist, it goes directly back not only to them, but back into the community, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a beater. This is the pair I'm working on right now. But well, yeah, I mean, definitely buying native made. I that's one thing. People are always like, if I'm not native, can I wear your beadwork? And I'm like, yes, please. Like, I don't sell anything to non-native people that has any kind of cultural significance.
Okay.
So, you know, like I make moccasins, but when it's non-native people buying them, I don't make Apache moccasins. I'll just make like kind of generic footwear, and I don't put any like culturally specific designs. So like, you know, this is a pair I'm making for my kid. This is an Apache moccasin, but you know, if it was not for my kid, it would be just like a more generic one. You know, another thing too is like learn about our cultures, learn about our history. Listen, you know, come to a powwow if it's a public powwow. Learn about our culture, observe, enjoy, try our food, you know, listen to our stories and appreciate it that way. Instead of, you know, dressing up in a costume and playing pretend, like come to our powwow and watch our dancing and enjoy it that way. And then, you know, that's a way that you can appreciate our culture and learn about us at the same time.
And at the minimum, just ask. We'll be happy to tell you.
Yeah.
Where I always ask.
I know. No, I know. And I think a lot of people were really worried about that whole MMIW. Well, can I wear it and all this and stuff, And I don't know if you guys already touched on that. Of course you can wear it. And, there's been a lot of creators that have talked about it, just don't put the red handprint across your face. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing too, when it comes to buying stuff with the MMIW, one thing that I always advise people is make sure if you are buying a shirt or a face mask or whatever that has something to do with MMIW, make sure the person who makes it is putting money towards MMIW causes. Because there was a creator, so May 5th is MMIW Awareness Day.
Yes.
And there was a creator who really rubbed me the wrong way. He was a Native creator and he was selling MMIW shirts. And there were a lot of especially Native women in the comments asking him, what charities are you donating to? Where does the money for these shirts go? And he got really rude with several women in the comments asking this question. So finally, a few days later, he makes a response video and says, well, I'm not donating to any charities. I'm trying to build my brand. And then in the future, I'll give back to the community. And that really rubbed me the wrong way because I'm like, you're making money off of our lives. And that doesn't sit right with me. So what I try to advise people is if you want to buy a product that, raises awareness for MMIW, a shirt, whatever, make sure the person selling that product is also giving the profits or a portion of the profits to an MMIW charity or organization that directly supports the MMIW cause, whether it be, give support to families of victims or searches or those kind of things, because it just doesn't sit right with me to have somebody building their brand off of murdered women and our lives being at risk. That's just maybe other people have different feelings about that, but that's my personal feelings about that.
I completely understand, because last year the Black community went through something very similar where a woman was using the unfortunate death of a Black teenager to fundraise for her business. So it is very uncomfortable. It's the best way I can describe it for me. It feels like my own people have become the colonizers and they're selling us again.
Shit is tacky.
Mm-hmm.
That's just tacky and disrespectful.
But some people, you just...
it just is. It's just tacky and disrespectful.
Some people, you just can't tell them anything.
But, a lot of the other stuff, too, there's music, there's stories, there's Amazon. Amazon was a whole website created for books. There's a bajillion books out there for people that really want to learn, really want to, understand. And because there's so many different tribes, what I would suggest to your viewers is, where do you live? If you live in the United States or if you live in Canada, where do you live? Find out what is around you. Where is the tribe? Where is the closest tribe around you? Or where did the people live? Where did the people used to live that, if you live in Los Angeles, who was the tribe that lived in Los Angeles? Current day Los Angeles. It's really not that hard to find out. And start with that, because where you live is where you make a difference. Where you live is where you can make the most impact. It's not, I can advocate for the Navajo reservation, for water because it's on my TikTok, but I don't live there. So it's harder for me to do that. I can make a difference in my community. I can make a difference where I live. I can make a difference, in the state surrounding me. it's really hard to make an impact nationally when you're not close to it.
And
I mean,
one of the things,
that's, is learn about what's near you or who used to live near you and start with that. And you'll be like, oh, you know what? It really was the Apaches, or it was the Cherokee, when they got split, or, it was the Sioux tribe. And guess what happened to them? And, then you start learning about, you start diving more deeper into it about treaties that were signed. And then you're going to find out the treaties that have been broken, and then that's when you start building upon that. And a lot of people ask me, well, where do I start? That's my answer. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I always ask them, where do you live? Because you're in your town, you're in your city, you live in that state, you pay taxes in that state, you rent in that state, all your money goes to that state or wherever you live. That's mostly what people are more interested in. And how does it affect me?
Yeah.
We're in this whole me thing, right? What's in it for me? That's what's in it for you. And I mean, that's where I can, unless there's just something that like, oh my gosh, I really want to learn about, Lakota because somebody told me I was related, or, you have something like that. But there is not one person I have ever talked to that claimed part Native of the whole my great grandma was a Cherokee that they can tell me one thing, one trait, one food, one type of clothing, one, migration, what they were about that they know of, that they're knowledgeable about, that they can speak on. So to me, if you don't know, there's plenty of out there. There's plenty of resources to learn, but you have to want to do the work. You have to do the work. Everybody has to do the work if that's what interests you. If it don't, then you know what? Just leave it alone and drop it and let it go.
I have people ask me a lot about, can you recommend me a book about Indigenous history? Because I'm a historian. And I always say that is such a broad topic because there are literally in just the United States over 500 different Indigenous nations. So there's so many books I could recommend. So it depends on what era and area and this and that. But one book I often recommend to people as a starter is Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. That I think is a great starting place for people.
Great book.
And another thing that I like to remind people too is just to be conscious about your language when you're talking about Native American people. Don't always refer to us in the past tense. Don't say things like the settlers wiped out the Native Americans, because that kind of language that people use all the time without really thinking about reinforces this idea that we don't exist. Because like I said at the beginning was that there are so many people that I've encountered in my life that believe that there are no Native Americans walking around on this earth today. And so just, be conscious of the language you use when you're talking about us. Instead of saying all the time Native Americans were, and, be conscious of that language. So, as a historian, primarily what I do on my page is a lot of decolonized history. So instead of saying things like this tribe was this, I'll say historically, this tribe did this and this and this, because I'm bringing up the fact that historically it was this way, but this tribe still exists today, but this is how they did things historically. So just being conscious of the language that you're using when you're speaking about it.
Okay. Well, ladies, let me thank you immensely for joining me this evening. every month kind of like revisit different topics like this. So hopefully in a month, if you all are available, we can come back and maybe bring some more people on and expand upon the education. But I do want to thank you dearly for joining me, and thank you so much. And if anybody has any final thoughts.
No, we're good. Yeah, just feel free to ask questions. You know, that's how everybody learns.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Happy to be here.
Alrighty. Well, as I always say, each one teach one and each one reach one. Till tomorrow night, you guys. Love you.
Yeah.